But let's get into why we're even here, Adam.
Oh, some existential questions right there.
Why the Iranian situation is where it is. We're going to narrow down that focus just a little bit. Yeah. Perfect. So, everyone, welcome to Idiot Seeking Village. That's Adam. I'm Rich, and Jesus Christ, Adam, we are once again crusading in the Middle East.
Praise Allah.
Oh boy! If you say Allahu Akbar 3 times fast, your microphone will blow up.
I was gonna say, does he just show up like Candyman?
It's like Bloody Mary. No, honestly, dude, I used to think that the writing team in charge of our simulation were just lazy because of just all the repetitive nature of everything that happens. And I've come to realize that it's not that they're lazy. It's that they're not even trying to write like a prestige HBO series type of deal. They're writing a soap opera. And when you take that perspective, that it's just, the uninspired, repetitive nature of what happens geopolitically really starts to kind of make sense.
Well, what do you call it all the time? Kayfab? Isn't that what you call it?
Kayfabe, which is the wrestling thing.
Kayfabe. Yeah, it's just all, just an endless story that keeps going on and on. And they just somehow, he changes his costume, he changes his personality, becomes good, he becomes bad. Same shit.
Yeah, so basically, whatever power of the universe, God, Allah, whomever, is basically a trash TV enthusiast.
Very, very possible. Very possible.
So I think, we touched on a couple things here, but I think it's important. I think so many people are going to be talking about what's happening now, and it's critical that when we think about like what's going on is that the first casualty of war is the truth. And so there's so much shit out there, and there's so many AI fake videos and all this stuff, that's circulating right now. And so much of this is up in the air, like we just talked about. I don't want to focus on what's happening right now. I want to focus on how the hell we got here and why the U.S. and Israel are pushing these attacks. And I really want the conversation to be something more than, well, Trump and Netanyahu are both desperate to avoid accountability once the cover of war fades away and deal with political repercussions. I want to start with kind of the early modern period and just kind of set it up to where we got to today. So back in like the 18th century, all that, Iran, that whole region was basically a war zone. There was some ruling dynasties, they'd collapsed, and you had basically like a series of warlords and claimants to the throne fighting it out for power. They also had multiple wars in that time frame against the Tsars of the Russian Empire, and they lost a lot of territory. Like they used to own Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, all those kind of Caucasus countries. And they also were getting imperial pressure from the Brits in the South as the time went on, who were projecting power up from their Indian holdings. So you had a bunch of like uprisings domestically, mostly against like royal corruption, chafing around foreign influence, and a whole bunch of like economic crises and a major famine and this and that as the 1800s led on. And this led to, at the beginning of the 20th century, a constitutional uprising and the end of what had been hundreds, if not thousands of years of royal absolutism. It was about 1906 when this happened. They were dead square in the middle of great power politics at the time, and imperialism and the projection of power and whole spheres of influence and all that. So World War I starts, and now in addition to the Russian Empire and the British Empire fudging around in Iran, you also add in the Ottomans to the mix. And so the result was this kind of hollowed out Tehran with a lot more tribalism and warlordism in the region. And they were really chafing against, like, look, this is a 2,500-year-old culture. Historically, they really go back. And so they're chafing against all these foreign powers who keep meddling in what they view as their domestic affairs. And it just continues to keep happening and happening and happening. So you get to the end of World War I, and the Brits come to this agreement. They sign this treaty that ends up with them having more control militarily and financially of Iran, which sparks like an even bigger nationalistic pushback at this point. This leads us to a guy whom you've definitely heard of, Reza Khan. So Reza Khan marched on Tehran in 1921 and basically conducted a coup. What he did was he paved the way over a period of a couple of years for something called the Pahlavi Dynasty. He started it, and it overthrew the ruling Qajar dynasty that had been really weak and taken over by everyone. He comes to be known as Reza Shah Pahlavi. And I'm just going to say this before I keep going. I've always had trouble keeping this straight. I've known this stuff for ages, but I always get the names mixed up. So I'm going to use like his full name and his son's full name going from here on out just to try to keep things straight. So you're going to hear a lot of very repetitive naming, but I think it helps me at least not go crazy here. So Reza Shah Pahlavi comes in, new dynasty. He's a nationalist and he's an authoritarian. He's also a modernizer and a westernizer. And that modernization and westernization came at the expense of traditional Islamic practices that had been in the region. Again, this is a 2,500-year-old culture that we're talking about. So put in the context of that last 150, 200 years of history where control swung back and forth between Tehran and the provinces, and there was all the influence of all these global empires, he swung the power firmly back to Tehran. And in the process, he faced a lot of pushback and criticism from clerics, leftists, conservatives, nationalists alike. His legacy is really complicated. He laid the groundwork for the modern nation state of Iran, and he made meaningful changes across legal, educational, and gender systems, like things that were introduced for the first time. And so he rules for about 20 years, up until World War II. And then what happened was the Brits and the Soviets were starting to get worried about German influence in Tehran. Germans had some ambassadors and some contacts there. And Reza Shah Pahlavi was, if he wasn't Nazi curious, he was at least fascist friendly, right? He was kind of wondering what's going on over there. So the Brits and the Soviets had supply lines for the U.S. Lend-Lease material that flowed through Iran to the USSR at the time. And they also had the oil refineries that were key to the war effort. They're panicking. They're like, the Germans cannot get this. And Reza Shah Pahlavi is not kicking them out as we're asking. So in 1941, the Soviets and the Brits invade. And they and within a week, they conquered the country and they secured Iran's oil and the supply lines for the Lend-Lease program that supplied the Eastern Front and kept Russia in the war. After the Brits and the Soviets, they come in, they're like, okay, we took over. They think about restoring the Qajar dynasty, and instead they decide the path of least resistance is force Reza Shah Pahlavi to abdicate, and in favor of his son, Mohammed Reza Pahlavi, who you've definitely also heard before and probably got confused for being the same guy as his dad, which I have definitely done in the past as well. So at this point, Reza Khan, a.k.a. Reza Shah Pahlavi, goes into exile and dies soon after, and we're talking about Mohammed Reza Pahlavi. So you laughed. So you laughed at abdicating in favor of his son. Any particular reason?
Because he's gonna be like, yeah, fuck dad. I'm gonna do exactly what you want and treat the people properly now. And I don't know, just replace one douchebag with another. I'm assuming.
Yeah, basically. I mean, he was 21, 22 when he came to power, and he just grew up in the palace. So, yeah, he wasn't exactly a guy who really had his own opinion of what's going on. And there's a reason that the Brits and the Soviets, after conquering Iran, were like, we're going to give it to your son, because he becomes a good, malleable puppet. And he relies on their support to stay in power. And so what Reza Shah Pahlavi had established when he first started the dynasty was essentially a monarchy with a state bureaucracy to support him. For the duration of the war under the Brits, Iran shifts towards more of a parliamentary constitutional democracy and a pluralistic government. So what that means is no longer is it just an absolute monarch, the Shah, who's in charge. It's the Shah is the head of state, and they now have a prime minister who's the head of the government. Think of England, right? You've got the king, You've got the prime minister. That's what Iran becomes. And because of this, they now have Mohammed Reza Pahlavi, unlike his father, shared more power with the provinces. They had diverse political parties spanning the spectrum. They had clerical parties, they had communist parties, they had nationalists, they had leftists, they had trade unions, and so on. So they had a very, democratic sort of government, and they had a freer press than they had ever had. So Mohammed Reza Pahlavi is coming into this. His support base is basically these outside imperial interests, some of the legacy bureaucracy left over from his dad's day, and some of the army who had benefited from him back in the day and just got their ass kicked by the Western powers and don't care for them, right? But he's really sharing power in a modern government at this point. So, war's over. Fast forward a couple years to the early 50s. The Brits and the Soviets already pulled out. Iran is getting its footing. The hot button issue of the day is control of the oil sector. And it's dominated by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, whom we all know today as BP or British Petroleum, our favorite Gulf of Mexico poisoners. You can't poison the Gulf of America, Adam, but you can poison the Gulf of Mexico.
I like it.
Yeah. So Iranians, almost universally, looked at the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company and the Brits' control of their oil sector as just a symbol of imperial domination in a post-imperial decolonized world. They're like, what the hell is this? Again, we're so sick and tired of hundreds of years of foreign meddling in our affairs, and this is really just a big national issue. So in 1951, the Iranian parliament, under a broad coalition of nationalists, clerics, and leftists, they name a new prime minister, a guy named Mohammed Mossadegh. And this is a problem because Mohammed Reza Pahlavi and Mossadegh, they're on opposite sides of this issue. The Shah, Mohammed Reza Pahlavi, he wants to keep his foreign support, right? He's there because of the West. He's their puppet. He's worried that nationalization is going to lose him support overseas, and the Western powers are going to embargo Iran, which is going to tank the economy, which is going to wreck his domestic support as well. He thinks he's a dead man walking if this happens. Add the cherry on top, Mossadegh, he's a descendant of the former Qajar dynasty that Reza Shah Pahlavi overthrew to start his own.
Of course.
Yes, exactly. It just kind of, everything's always connected here. So Mossadegh is this very statesman-like parliamentarian. He's got the bona fides of legitimate claims to power, both through the government as well as through blood. And so he's starting to look like this charismatic, forward-thinking, progressive leader who's capable of taking Iran to the next level on the world stage and kind of getting them out from under the yoke of imperialism and colonialism. So he goes in, he's got a mandate, and he nationalizes the oil company. He succeeds. The world is pissed off at him, but he's on the rise. He does it successfully. They've got the oil, they got the control, and the economy doesn't collapse. He ends up being 1952 Time Magazine Man of the Year.
Oh, I could be honest with you. I have no idea what's going to happen further, but I'm going to guess this guy's not long for this world.
Absolutely not. So, yeah, the Brits, namely good old Winston Churchill and Anthony Eden, who was the prime minister at the time, they were pissed off. They were not happy about losing their oil assets. And generally speaking, they refused to kind of accept the reality of this post-colonial world where locals had sovereignty over their own countries and their natural resources. So they turned to the U.S. They played up these rumors that Mossadegh was becoming dependent on the Tudeh party, which was the communist party, but as part of that pluralistic government. And they said, hey, this Tudeh party is a vector for the Soviets. They're exerting influence on Mossadegh, and we've got this big anti-communist shtick going on in the early 1950s. So there's a little bit of a kerfluffle between Mohammed Reza Pahlavi and Mossadegh. What happens is Pahlavi, with MI6 and the CIA, they all work together. They basically do a palace coup. They oust Mossadegh, and they restore the Shah and shifts Iran firmly back from this parliamentary system towards autocracy and monarchy. So that's the infamous overthrow that we always hear about. So Mohammed Reza Pahlavi joins the MI6 CIA coup and goes back into power, and he goes, I don't have to play nice with the rest of you anymore. I'm not losing power again. So he starts to concentrate power away from Parliament, and he uses the army and the security services to stomp out opposition, as any good dictator does. What is an authoritarian going to do without a police state apparatus? Nothing. So he also creates the illusion of free government. He creates two political parties, one, a ruling party, and two, a loyalist opposition party that does whatever they want. Whatever he wants, I should say. So by 1960, the elections were so blatantly rigged that he even had to denounce them publicly because it was just so comically bullshit.
Sorry, we couldn't put on a good show. I'm embarrassed. I'm really embarrassed that I won by this large of a margin. I'll try better next time.
Basically, yeah. So in that time frame, he's also developing his police force, the secret police, as I mentioned, known by the acronym SAVAK, SAVAK.
Got to have a secret police, too. You
can't just have police. You have to have secret police, of course, and then secret police.
That's like my main rule number one for a dictator.
Yeah. Is this like a BYO police situation? Yes, it is. So they do what they do, right? What secret police do. They repress political opponents, the leftists, the nationalists, the religious activists, basically three groups that have nothing in common other than they're all really, 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 really going to end up hating the Shah because of all this repression. So strange bedfellows in politics. So about a quarter of a century is going by. Iran shifts rapidly into a repressive police state. A lot happens that I'm going to gloss over because it's not that important for what we're talking about. But basically, they go through a bunch of reforms. They get an oil boom. They do some land redistribution. They have rising literacy rates. They have rising incomes. And an economy that's heavily tied up to the West through oil and arms deals. But at the cost of severe lack of free expression, political agency, and a brutal police state that suppressed dissent and engaged in mass censorship and alienated pretty much anyone that wasn't directly tied to the regime's apparatus. If you weren't on the take, you pretty much hated this. So here's the funny thing. And it's so weird to think about it now, right? Because this is over 50, 60 years ago. But in that time frame, Iran was viewed as a bastion of stability in the Middle East. Think of the way that people talk about Israel now, right, as this bulwark of stability and Western values in the Middle East. That used to be Iran in this time under Pahlavi. Yeah, it's crazy. So by the time the mid to late 70s started to roll around, the shine was coming off fully. They had a bloated military. The economy was in shambles. Inflation was rampant. Public and social services were breaking down. The Shah continued to push for Westernization, which was increasingly unpopular because people were tying the failures of the government and the repression that they were suffering under to the West. So like, we don't want to be more Westernized. We want to be Iranian. We want to be Persian. We want to be ourselves. And you keep pushing this shit. And by the way, this shit is killing us. So basically, the people were largely done with the Shah. They firmly blamed not just him, but they blamed the U.S. because we put him in power, right, through the CIA, and we've been propping him up all these years. So they understood cause and effect, and they didn't just, look beyond that. And in the end, Mohammed, Reza Pahlavi, he found out too late that the years of purges, like killing, imprisoning, exile his democratic rivals, left him with basically just a hard-line Muslim clergy as his primary opposition. And that's an opposition that those same liberals, nationalists, conservatives, and leftists would all end up rallying behind because it became this anybody but the Shah situation.
Right.
Yeah. So craziness, right?
And we know what happens.
Well, so from here on, I'm going to stop with the Iranian history, right? Because we kind of know what happens here, right? This has been pretty much everyone's aware. If you watch the movie Argo, you pretty much know what happens from here on out. But I want
the same thing. It turns into the same thing. It's the same story, but with a different lead.
Basically, so
it's like filming the same movie again and just putting different actors in it.
Well, let's do that. That's what Hollywood does anyway. They make money on it, right?
Well, that's why we have an actor as president now. Again.
Oh, God.
Just like we did with Reagan, and now we have a new one.
That's never not worked out for America.
Nope.
Let's pivot to Israel. I mentioned them before, briefly, but 1947, the UN vote on partitioning in Palestine, Iran is one of the parties that votes against the partition plan. They also vote against Israel's admission to the UN. The first Arab-Israeli war occurs right after they start to move in, but Iran isn't part of that coalition. And actually, Iran kind of chill despite voting no against Israel in the partition. They actually don't hate them the way that the Arab states do. So Israel wins the war, and Iran and Turkey are actually the first two majority Muslim countries to start building ties with Israel. They're not Arab like the other nations are, and so they're kind of on the outside. So the Iranian regime at this time, again, is very pro-Western leaning.
Right.
And they're a puppet, and they want to get in line. So they want to be friendly with Israel because the West wants people to be friendly with Israel. Now, the clerics and such, they're firmly behind the Palestinian cause, and they're against this. But the government is the administration, it's Shah, and that's what they want. The second is Israel's looking around for non-Arab partners to play nice with. They're up to their eyeballs in Arab opposition. And here's Iran, which, despite being a Muslim country, is Shia, not Arab Sunni, and is largely ethnically Persian. So they don't share, at this time, in the late 40s and the early 50s, you've got this decolonialization, this collapse of imperialism. You've got the rise and the beginnings of Arab nationalism. These are all former French and British colonial holdings, and now that they have their independence, their positioning is largely anti-Western, anti-monarchical, and pan-Arab, the exact opposite of Iran at the time. So in this kind of enemy of my enemy vibe, Mossadegh's Iran and Ben-Gurion's Israel found each other like misfit kids on the playground that the other kids didn't want to play with. They were like, hey, you want to hang out? Yeah, sure, let's hang out. So after the Mossadegh coup, that alignment deepened even further. And Tehran and Tel Aviv ended up being these dual pillars of U.S. regional strategy. And relations went from like very informal at first, with some basic trade and exchange stuff under the radar, to gradually becoming institutionalized as part of the U.S.'s backed regional efforts. So by the mid-60s, Iran was a central partner in an Israeli non-Arab periphery doctrine that included states like Turkey and Ethiopia. Iran exported oil to Israel to circumvent the Arab boycott, and a permanent Israeli diplomatic delegation in Iran evolved into an embassy and a full-on exchange of ambassadors by the time of the 1970s. It was also key to intelligence and security strategy and sharing. Remember I mentioned SAVAK, right? The Shah's secret police force? Guess what? That organization was formed with the help of U.S. and Israeli intelligence officers. So if you want to know...
way.
Yeah, so if you want to know who went out of their way to enable the torture and execution of thousands of political prisoners and the violent suppression of dissent, leading to the rise of the Ayatollah, it's the U.S. and Israel. It's the CIA and it's Mossad.
It's usually how it plays out.
Yep. Little law of unintended consequences. A little supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan before that even happened.
Before it was cool.
But before it was cool. We were supporting extremist groups before it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the high point was probably somewhere around 1973, the latest Arab-Israeli or Yom Kippur War and the OPEC oil embargo at that time. Israel was the U.S.'s military ally in the region, and Iran was the oil producer and the regional cop, effectively. And the two coordinated on support sometimes for things like Kurdish nationalist efforts, especially in areas like Iraq, as part of a political counterweight to the pan-Arabism of the time. So these guys were friends, dude. They worked together geopolitically.
Will wonders ever cease?
But this was all intimately tied to the Shah. And so once Mohammed Reza Pahlavi lost the plot, anti-Israeli sentiment was tied into anti-U.S. sentiment for largely the same reasons. And with one key difference, the Palestinian question and kind of the simmering religious tensions around Jerusalem gave that extra, the religious element to anti-Israelism on top of the anti-U.S. sentiment. So for the first 30 or so years of Israel's existence, Iran and Israel were besties.
I feel like we almost can't even say we or anything like that. It's really just all manipulation by just select few people who with tons of money who manipulate the whole game. Because most of it is just, that's why it repeats over and over again, is because people are just moving us around. We're not like, oh, the United States, we invaded Iran. No, most of us don't want to invade Iran. There's only a few people who decided to make this happen. There's only a few people who decided to make the Shah and put him in charge. So we need to really start really addressing that and figuring out who those people are. Exactly who they are. And there's a good chance they're on the Epstein files at this point.
Well, I think you shared this in the group chat, was the Iranian statement. We have deployed state-of-the-art Fatah-2 hypersonic ballistic missiles against strategic assets of the American pedophile regime in the region. So, yeah, I appreciate that, the sauciness of that. It does remind me a little bit of the Iraqi minister, remember, during the second Gulf War invasion?
Yeah.
That guy who basically got on TV and whatnot and was talking about how they're going to,
like every meme in the world.
Oh, he was hilarious. I forget his name off, man. He was so funny. And then he died like a week later or something.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's so funny. You say that Israel and Iran were friends because we were, propping up the Shah. Mm-hmm. And then we lose the Shah. So now we go into Iraq and say, hey, Saddam, let's go fight Iran.
So let's talk post-revolution here real quick, right, between these two. So this is where things get weird. So Tehran, pretty quickly, revolution, right? It's clerical, it's Islamist in nature. They pretty quickly adopted a staunchly anti-Israel position, right? Cultural and geopolitical. Israel was a bit more chill when it happened. They were kind of like, hey, dude, what happened to you, right? It's kind of like you get that one buddy who gets real weird and gets into like a cult or something. You're kind of like, hey, I'm still going to talk to you for a bit, but what's happening over there? So Israel's a bit more chill. Tehran was almost immediately pulled into that brutal 8-year war with Iraq right after the revolution. So there wasn't a lot of Iranian anti-Israel activity in that time frame for like the first 8 to 10 years as a result, because they were busy. They had shit going on their border with Saddam that they were dealing with. And one of my favorite political quips of all time is Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin saying about that war, quote unquote, I wish both sides success.
I thought we were friends.
Well, and so again, this is where it's weird. At the time, Israel was a key intermediary in the Iran-Contra affair. The weapons that were going there were U.S. weapons, but they were Israeli weapons that were shipped there first. And one of the things that actually was kind of fucking up that whole thing was they would have like Star of David or the Israeli flag or some sort of, nomenclature on the weapons in the box that I got delivered in that noted them as Israeli, and the Iranians didn't want that. But the Israelis were part and parcel of that whole Iran-Contra affair. So they were still engaging with Iranians and sending them weapons in that time until really, and this really became more prevalent in the late 80s and going into the early to mid 90s, just the scope of how anti-Israeli Iran's efforts actually were. And you get things like bombings, you get the support for Hezbollah and other kind of regional groups and things like that. That starts to become really obvious and things you can't avoid and ignore anymore. And that's when it started to kind of get weird. But the Iranians, in addition to just the whole, hey, they were part of this Western coalition that was fucking with us for years, they also had another reason for kind of their anti-Israeli heel turn. In the same way, think about it, the same way that Israel and Iran found each other as partners against pan-Arabism in the immediately post-war, post-revolutionary Iran has used Israel as a foil to push pan-Islamism. Because what's a better way to get people to look past that whole difference between Arabs and Persians and Shias and Sunnis than to focus on the outsider in the region? And to be like, we have more in common than you do. We should be working together against them. And then they pair that with that staunch anti-imperialism, which lets them play into the anti-US sentiment to cut across ethnic and national identity in the region. This is why they've also taken the Palestinian cause on, because remember, Palestinians are Sunnis and the Iranians are Shia. But to them, them championing the Palestinian cause lets them point out the hypocrisy of the Arab governments who were happy to throw the Palestinians under the bus to play nice with Israel in the West. So, and another one, if we actually fast forward to like the current day, you'll see that Israel, they've also flipped their approach. I saw it said Ben-Gurion's Israel had that periphery doctrine, right? Let's look on the outside. Who else is here that we can play nice with, aside from our immediate neighbors who hate our guts? They've been working to counteract Iran's approach now. They actually are building relationships with the Arab states that once hated their guts and tried to destroy them.
Yeah, they're good friends with Saudi Arabia now.
Yeah. So, strange bedfellows, Adam. So, yeah, that's, I think, taking a step back, right? Big picture of how the hell did we get here without digging too much into the details of some of these things. But yeah, it's the question is, are we going to get into a classic blunder of getting into a land war in Asia? Like, are we, is Trump just going to launch a couple missiles for a couple days? We already have our depleted stockpiles. Are we just going to shoot our shot, say we got rid of the Ayatollah, it's now up to the Iranian people? To what extent, if that fails, does he go back in or continue to push this?
Yeah, I mean, Trump's MO is without question to just be like, I'm done. Peace, see you later. Unless there's some other puppet master who's like, listen, if you want those billions of dollars when you for your family, you'll go back in there and send some troops in there too. That's the only other explanation kind of thing, because he doesn't give a shit about anything but himself. Grifters don't care about fucking other people. They care about themselves and the grift.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the art of the grift. So, blow shit up. I look cool. What more do you want? Hey, these people couldn't get their shit together. That's all. Goodbye.
I mean, the meme for the past few days has been, my God, Israel must have something in the Epstein files that they're blackmailing him with. I think it's more boring and mundane than that. Is probably they've just, to your point, someone's holding billions of dollars of investments over his head and saying, you want to see this money materialize, you better keep this up.
Yeah. But I am sure that the Epstein Mossad connection is really probably going strong in the interwebs.
You and I are not conspiratorial enough to to focus on that one. There's some good work being done by some people out there about this, but I appreciate the Epstein's alive in Israel ones.
That'd be funny.
Yeah, then to me that one's not that plausible, because this has to be the most infamous man on planet Earth right now. Like,
well, I mean,
someone would take a picture.
I mean, he doesn't, like, Epstein doesn't look like some guy who's just like, doesn't look like anybody else.
He looks like Anthony Bourdain, but we know Bourdain's dead, so yeah, not confusing.
Or is, well, I guess the only time will tell with this one for sure, because I'm the vibes that he's just gonna bail in like a couple weeks and just keep blowing shit up and peace out.
I think this goes to what we talked about. We talked about Venezuela, right? Is he's feeling emboldened. He's now he's 2 for 2 on capturing Maduro and killing the Ayatollah in back-to-back events. He's feeling his power right now. You've got to be, if you're whoever's left in the Cuban regime, whoever's in any other state that is on Trump's radar, is on his shit list, you've got to be sweating at the moment, because he's just going to keep going and going and going until he fucks up. Remember, we tried to go into Iran. We tried to go in during the revolution, and the damn Huey, or whatever it was, crashed, and the Marines died. You need one fuck up to not work out. You remember the guy at the State of the Union? He took the 4 bullets or whatever. He's bleeding out, and he's still into the helicopter. Okay, if he passes out from blood loss and that helicopter crashes or cannot take off, and those Marines or Rangers or whomever they were die in that process, they're not feeling good, right? That's a massive fuck up. And they're
I think he'd be like, we still got him. It was unfortunate that there was casualties, kind of like just now. He's like, I think there's going to be casualties. There's going to be more casualties. I'm like, he just wants to kill leaders that he can kill, and these are like small-time guys, so I got bigger bombs than you, so I'm going to kill you guys, and I'm not going to change anything. I'm just releasing my will upon you. And what makes you think we have any intentions of hanging around to win or lose? Usually we're just going to probably just walk away. That's what Trump loves to do. I blew up a lot of shit. I'm done.
Yeah, that's the thing with the military, the Pentagon sounding the alarm, and I've heard this several times leading up to this over the last few months, is that we're kind of low on ammunition, generally speaking. Like, we're not well stocked, I guess, since the Afghanistan and the Iraq wars. Like, we haven't really rebuilt the stockpiles for a lot of things, which crazy because we've been spending more and more. So it's like, what the hell have we been spending that Pentagon money on? Right? Again, they keep failing audits. But it's that thing where he goes, well, it's going to be 4 days. Well, now it's going to be 4 weeks. And it's like, General's like, we don't have the ammunition to actually pull this off. So, he kind of, to your point, has to hit and run, which would fall into his whole thing. Like, hey, I'm just going to take out some big guys, hit a couple of big targets, and it's up to the people of Iran to overthrow their government. Now, good luck. Right.
Yeah, he'll drop a few bombs every other day or whatever. And he's like, it's still going on, but it's not really going on. Yeah. And it's just like, all right, we killed all these people. It's up to you guys. Make it happen.
Yeah. He's going to say, like, I did my job. And it's like, well, not really, because, you took out a couple of senior leaders and you took out air defense systems. You haven't taken out the Revolutionary Guard Corps. You haven't taken out the secret police. Like, these are the instruments of repression. There's still political players who have power and are filling the void. You haven't taken them out. So, in the same way we've been trying to do for over a century, airstrikes, air superiority is not enough to induce regime change. It just isn't.
No, the notion is it's no different than drug cartels, and you kill one cockroach, another one takes its place.
Because they're operating under the principle where, look, if someone were to attack America and take out Trump, this shit would largely stop, right? You still have the entire political apparatus and people, but you don't, no one's going to kind of fill his void in the same way that he is. These organizations, Nicolas Maduro was the strongman at the top of Venezuela, right? That was his cult of personality deal. It was him and Hugo Chavez before him. The Ayatollah has been diversifying power across multiple organizations and structures within Iranian society since the revolution, because they've been wanting to avoid a decapitation strike ending their revolution. And so they've moved away from that. So, look, the Ayatollah is dead. Great. They just announced the council and they're going to assign a new Ayatollah, just like they did when the last one died in 1989. It's not going to change anything.
No, it never does. That's why when Israel blows up all these terrorists, the number one terrorist, so there'll be a number two terrorist will be now number one.
Exactly.
Just like they killed a guy in Mexico, the drug cartel leader in Mexico. You think nobody's going to take over his position and be like, I'm in charge now? They'll kill each other for a while. And that could happen here. They destroy a couple, Royal Guard depots and people get access to guns now and they start killing each other. And there you go. Winning? Is that what we call winning now? I'm just not sure.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Trump's going to claim success because the Ayatollah is dead. That's really all he needs. He's already achieved success as far as he's concerned. Like, he got the Ayatollah. That's not going to induce regime change in Iran alone. And so, what does winning look like? What does this accomplish? And the question is, we don't have the munitions to continue a long-term aerial bombardment. Iran has been sending hundreds of missiles and drones against targets within the region. They're getting a lot of them are intercepted, but by all accounts, the counter ballistics, they're also getting low on their point. So it's like, how long is this going to keep going on? Eventually, someone's going to run out of ammunition first. And at the moment, it sounds like we are.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the purpose of this was entirely. Is it they want to go into war? That's what they wanted to do, and maybe people are... that was like what I've been listening to. People were implying that because Trump is, financed by Saudi Arabia, that they wanted to take out the people in Iran a little bit. I'm not really sure what the agenda is here, because there is no, we're going in here, there's no direction. We're going to blow up these people and they're going to make a decision. Okay, and what if they decide that they're just going to keep doing what they're doing and it just makes no sense.
Yeah, this is what you would have expected back in, I believe, what was it, January, December, whenever those massive protests were happening and the Iranians were in the street. This is when that would have been helpful.
Yeah.
But now
when he said that we were going to do something about it and we weren't going to let him do it.
Right. Now we're weeks past people being in the streets. That revolutionary surge
and being slaughtered
is over. Yeah, now you don't have people in the streets. If they rise up now, you've got a fully mobilized army and police state ready to fight back. So they're in a worse position than they were to actually enact regime change. And I really think that's everything he's pushing for is, well, I did my part, and now it's up to the Iranian people to overthrow the rest of the government. It's not sufficient. I mean, look, hundreds of kids were killed in school bombings during this strike. I hope nothing but the best for them. And if they've clearly wanted regime change for a while, I hope they get it. But I don't know that this is necessarily going to pull it off for them.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what their goal was. I don't know if there was really a long-term goal.
You know what? I think there's only one proper way to leave off this episode, my friend, and it's everyone should open up your web browser and go to draftbarontrump.com.
How old is he anyway?
20?
Sign him up.
He's military
I'm sure
age.
He has flat feet. I'm sure he has flat feet, or he can't serve.
I'm pretty sure Trump would launch Eric, through a howitzer first.
Take my other sons first, please. I'm begging you. Take them.
It's like a Rodney Dangerfield bit.
Yes, exactly.
All right, everyone. Be safe. Be good.
God bless America.
Merca. Bye.
Bye. Idiots Seeking Village is a production of Village Idiots Media. For more, find us online at villageidiotmedia.com or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and wherever you get podcasts.